Hello everyone, let's look at the top 15 important questions on the term compensating controls from domain number 1. Now this is very important area and they keep regularly asking questions, from this area from domain number 1. And there are a lot of questions, in this topic. So I thought, let's bring all the questions at one place and let's, have a brief discussion. So before I discuss the important questions on the term compensating control, let's understand what do we mean when we say compensating controls. Now, for time being, forget about CISA, forget about IT audits and everything. What do we mean by the basic meaning of the term to compensate? Now if you open any English dictionary, what do we see when we check the term to compensate? What is to compensate? Compensate basically means to reduce the bad effect of something, to reduce the bad impact of something. So we are trying to reduce that. Okay, this is the basic meaning of the term to compensate. If you understand that term, you will understand this control also. Okay, now for example, if I say that, uh, the airline sent me a check to compensate for losing my luggage. So I'm trying to say that, they for some reasons, my luggage is lost, and the airline industry, they are, of course, obviously, now since my baggage is lost or it's damaged, right, they cannot reverse it back. They cannot reverse the event. But what they are doing, they are trying to pay me something. They are trying to compensate, reduce the bad effect. Okay, they are trying to uh, compensate by paying me a check, right, or paying me a certain amount. Similarly, if I say that, there is one guy who is, he's willing to work hard to compensate for his lack of skill. So I'm trying to say that, he's lacking some skill in some area, but because what he's doing, okay, he's not having the knowledge or the experience or the skill, but what now he's doing is that he's working hard towards it. So he's trying to compensate for the lack of skill. Okay, so basically you are not having something and you're trying to compensate for that. So similarly here also in compensating control, we say that we cannot have the primary control, the main control. We cannot have because of some reasons. Now we are trying to have, I mean, we already have something, in place, which is kind of, we can say, compensating for the lack of the primary control. Okay, so that's why, basically they say that when you use the term compensating controls, so compensating controls, it's what, it's alternative security measures, alternative security measures or safeguards implemented when when primary control, the primary control are impractical, or impossible. We will discuss an example also to make this simple. So either, we cannot have the primary control, it is impractical, or it's impossible. Okay, now let's take one simple example. Since you guys are in domain number 1, so I'm sure that, you guys have not seen the other domains, right? So I'll be taking very simple examples. In case if I use some technical examples, it's okay if you understand. Again, if you don't understand, then also it's fine. Okay, so let's understand when we say impractical. Now let's say the organization is very small, they don't have enough budget. Okay, it's a small company. Not all the companies will have the money, right, to invest in high end security tools or high end IT tools, right? We have discussed in domain number 2 in the governance thing, right? So invest in IT when it's required by business, right? But let's say if my business itself is at a very small scale, it's a small company and I don't have enough budget. right? So I may not go for high end solutions, I may not go for expensive solutions, right? So I'll be, what to say, I'll be compensating, with something else, right? So let's say, for example, to access a room, let's say, ideally I can say the primary control should have been, there should be a CCTV, there should be some biometric access control or something, right, to get an access to this room. But let's say if I cannot afford, biometric solutions or, CCTV and all this, let's say I'm a small company, right? And instead of this thing, I'm having what? I'm having a watchman or a security guard, and there is a manual register. There is a manual register is there. Okay, there is a security guard, there's a manual register. Now, can this compensate it fully 100%? No, it cannot do that. Okay, 100% this is the efficient solution. We should be having everything automated, right? Okay, because here, of course, there will be more security, right? This is the ideal solution, but we cannot have this. It's impractical for us. Okay, because our business, we run at a very small scale. We don't have enough budget to go for these solutions. We may think in the future, but as of now we are not matured enough to have these solutions, right? So we are having a security guard, and the manual register is there. Whenever someone wants to get an entry, the watchman verifies, he'll check the ID cards. He will make them mark the entry in the register, right? So this is a compensating control example, right? So this is a compensating control. Okay, now here in this case it was impractical for having this thing. Now there are times when it can be even impossible to have what a primary control in place. Now let's say impossible. Now let's say there is an application, it's a legacy application. What is legacy application? It means that it is compatible, maybe with outdated, it needs outdated version of, let's say, the operating system Windows. Okay, so this application, it is only compatible with an outdated, unsupported version of Windows that no longer receives security updates, but we need that application for some business requirements, some business use, right? Now I cannot think of going as of now for some other solution or for whatever, because my business requirements is being met by using this application, but this is dependent on some outdated version of the Windows, right? So here it's not possible for us as of now. Okay, now even though here I may not be able to do the security updates or the security patches, right? But I'm having firewalls, I'm having, I have isolated this entire network, right? I'm having anti-malware solutions, I'm having other solutions in place, right? So those things are compensating for lack of using the updated software, or this issue is being what it is, the impact of this is being reduced by some other measures. All right, so I hope that now you have understood the term compensating control. It's very simple thing, right? So here also they have mentioned offset a deficiency or weakness in the control structure of the enterprise, often because the baseline controls cannot meet a stated requirement due to a legitimate technical, the thing which we just discussed about, that legacy applications, either it could be technical reasons or business constraints. It's a small organization, we don't have enough budget. We cannot have enough resources for the current solution to be in place. That's why we are going for some other solutions, alternative measure. It's nothing but compensating control. Okay, so let's start discussing the top 15 questions on this term compensating control. All right, so let's look at the first question. So in a small IS department where segregation of duties is not possible. Okay? Small IS department. So this is H1. This is hint which the question is providing. So question will always provide you at least one hint. There are times when they give you multiple hints, but at least one hint will be provided for sure. Now it is up to you to understand how are you able to capture those hints. That's why reading the question and interpreting the question is the most important for this exam. right? So when they say small, why the hell are they using the word small? Because they want to let you know that we are small, we have less budget, we have less money, we cannot afford a huge amount. Okay, we cannot have multiple departments, we cannot hire multiple people, right? So we are a small company, and in our company there's a small IT department, right? where where segregation of duties it's not possible. We cannot have multiple people, hired for multiple roles. And this is what happens, if you go in a small company, it's very very common for individuals to do multiple roles, right? So this means that one person might have the authority, for example, to create or modify user accounts. The same person will be having the authority to process the transaction. The same person will be reviewing the logs. Okay, for keeping a very simple example, let's take an example of, you are going to give the CISA exam, right? Now if I ask you yourself to check your answer sheet. Okay, now this is not a offline exam. This is online exam, right? But let's say if I give you the authority to check your paper, will you mark yourself incorrect? Like, will you say that okay, you have answered some question wrong? Will you do that? Of course not. If I give you the authority, now your role is what? You are going to go to the test center and give the CISA exam, right? There will be some other independent body who will be going to check the paper. Okay, now in our case, it's a system which does that. But just to keep a very simple example, okay, that there is some other body, right? ISACA is going to check the papers, right? But let's say if I give you the same authority, then can't you misuse your powers? Okay, definitely you will do that, right? You will abuse your authority, because I am giving you the authority to write the paper, and I am giving you the authority to check the paper yourself. Definitely you will be misusing your powers, right? That is the reason segregation of duties is very important. Okay, for example, let's say in a company, okay, there is one person who can create the vendor accounts, and the same person can process the payments to those vendors. Okay, now let's say I can say that there is XYZ Incorporation, which is my vendor, and I have the authority to create that vendor. I have the authority to authorize the vendor, and I have the authority to even process the payments. So don't you think so? I can create lot of multiple fake vendor accounts. I can pay to my relatives. I can pay to my friends. I can just randomly create fake vendor accounts, right? It is very much possible, right? So that is the reason segregation of duty is very important, right? So the question is saying in a small IS audit department where segregation of duties is not possible, which of the following is the most effective compensating control, right? Option number A is what? Transaction log review. Okay, now what option number A is saying that whatever transaction is done, after the transaction you review the logs, you review what exactly has happened. What was the transaction? When was the transaction initiated? To whom was the transaction initiated? For what purpose, for what reason? Whether that particular transaction was authorized. Okay, so basically, even though same person is doing multiple roles, but at least whatever things was done, whatever event or transaction was done, can't we review those transactions afterwards, right? So this is a very good option as a compensating control. Okay, because here we may not have to deploy multiple people, right? Here it's just that there's one person or two persons who are handling multiple roles, but afterwards we'll be reviewing the transaction logs, right? So this option looks good, but let's not come to the solution as of now. Let's look at option number B. Option number B is saying background checks. Now background checks are basically, it's a kind of a preventive control, which normally happens before someone is hired, right? Before someone is hired, we do the background checks, whether there is any criminal charges against that person, what's the background and everything, we just try to understand, the background of the person. Okay, normally independent, there are a lot of independent companies which do that, right? They help to assess a person's trustworthiness, whether, because understand one thing, as a company, if I'm hiring someone, I need to trust that person, right? Because that person might be having a lot of confidential data of my company. What if, he is involved in some, uh, 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 wrongful activity? He can leak my information. Maybe he is, I mean, there can be a lot of things which can happen. Basically, I just want to understand the trustworthiness of the person, right? So for this reason, we have what background checks, but they don't address the ongoing risk of the abuse of the power due to the lack of segregation of duties. They can't do that, right? Like this control cannot, address the abuse of power which we are discussing about here, right? This cannot be the right option for sure, right? Background checks, it is good, but it cannot help you prevent abusing of your authority or the power. Okay. Option number C is what? Mandatory holidays. Now this is a good option. Okay. Mandatory holidays. What exactly do we mean by mandatory holidays? Here we are requiring the employees, to take a week off, maybe like every year. Okay. Now mandatory holidays, this can expose fraud if someone else has to step in and perform the employee's duties. Okay. However, it's very important to understand that these are always periodic, which might happen maybe like once a year or twice a year. So of course this leaves significant gaps, where fraudulent or activities could go undetected, right? And also it's very important to understand that that there can be a significant damage, which can occur before the mandatory holiday period even arrives. Let's say if it is once a year, or let's say it's twice a year, once every 6 months. But what if the fraudulent abuse of abuse of your power has happened, maybe in the first month or in the second month? That will go what? Undetected, right? Because in that one week or 2 weeks, the other person who will be coming and doing our role, the other guy's role, he may or he may not detect the fraud, right? So the basically the fraud might go undetected. So it is okay, but it's not a very good solution. Okay, option number D is talking about user awareness training. Again, user awareness training here, it focuses on educating the users, but it doesn't directly compensate for the lack of the segregation of duty, right? So clear cut, the correct option over here is option number A, transaction log review. All right, so let's look at the next question. During an audit, it's discovered that access control doors in a workspace fail to remain locked when there's a power failure. Again, I'm repeating, during an audit, what is discovered? It's discovered. What is discovered? That access control doors. Now, what are access control doors? Basically, these are doors, that restrict the entry only for the authorized individuals in a specific room, right? Maybe through a biometric system, or maybe through a key cards, or maybe you have to put some code or something, right? So it's an automated control, right, to enhance the security by limiting who can access that particular room, or the area, right? So we have what access control is there. Okay, just a second. Yeah, access control doors, right, in a workspace fail to remain locked when there is a power failure. So basically the question is saying that when there is power outage or power failure, our control, access control, maybe we are having biometric or whatever, that is not active. So it means it is what? It fails to remain locked. So don't you think so? That it means the physical security of the work area is compromised, right? Anyone, maybe there can be unauthorized access, there can be even security breach. Let's say if the area, or the room contains sensitive data or the critical systems, right? This could also lead to what? Security breach. Okay, physical security of the work area is compromised if this. See, now understand one thing, since we are in domain number 1, there can be few terms which will come again in domain number 5, 4 and 5, right? So nothing to worry about. We are taking simple examples here so that you understand from the domain 1 specific angle, right? So here, when you say that the access control doors, it fails to remain locked, it means that our physical security of the work area is compromised, right? Now the question is saying what is the most appropriate step for the auditor to take? Okay. Option number is saying recommend keeping the doors locked at all times. Okay. So option number is A is talking about recommending the solution directly. Option number B is saying determine whether there are any compensating controls. Option number C is saying confirm whether the practice, whatever practice it's happening, whether that complies with the security policy of the organization or not. Just check what exactly the security policy of the organization is saying, and just try to see whether whatever the actions is being done right now, whatever practice is being done right now, whether that comply with whatever is written in the security policy. Option number C is saying that. And option number D is saying that directly report this as a finding to the management as a high risk. Directly say that, directly report that it's a high risk thing because, during the power failure, the access control doors it fails to remain locked. It means it is unlocked, right? So it's a high risk. Directly report. Understand one thing: whenever you have option, whenever you have these kind of options, before recommending or before reporting something, it's very important that you understand whether the organization is having some other controls in place, some alternative measures in place, which can reduce which can reduce or mitigate the impact, the risk basically. Okay, it's very important to understand that whether the organization is having some other controls in place. Okay, for example, here there can be a security guard. Let's say whenever these kind of thing happens, there can be there can be a power backup in place. Okay, for these access control doors we can have what we can have a power backup solution. Whenever there is a power outage, we can use the backups. That is again what a good compensating control, because we are when we have this power backup, especially in this area, then what will happen is that this control will not fail, right? Or maybe we can have a security guard that we can appoint one person, okay, saying that whenever these things happens, you keep an eye of what exactly is happening. Again, that is high risky, but again, that is again a what compensating control is, it's a example of compensating control, right? It's very important we need to understand first whether there is some other controls in place to address this risk before recommending or before reporting things. So of course, without sure, it's a very easy question. The correct option over here is option number B, determine whether there are compensating controls. Now option number C here is saying that confirm whether the practice complies with the security policy. But understand one thing, it's not that the policy will always be right. There is a possibility or chance that the policy itself might be inadequate or outdated, right? So auditor's role is also to assess what the effectiveness of the control, not just mere compliance. Okay, whatever was written in the policy, it is being complied. No, that itself can be outdated. No, that itself can be inadequate, right? So correct option is option number B. All right, so let's look at the next question. Again, a similar question to the previous one. An IS auditor finds that a database administrator DBA is both developing as well as implementing changes in the production environment. As soon as you see this line in the exam, automatically one thing should come in your mind that it's a question of segregation of duties. Okay, these are all hints, and this is how you need to actively read the question. Okay, second hint, due to limited resources, very important hint given by the question. It's a small company, limited resource. That's the reason we are doing all these things. So immediately one thing should come in your mind that okay, this question is somewhat linked with the compensating control part. These are all hints which the question will directly or indirectly give you. Okay, what should the auditor first do? Option number A, ensure a change management process is followed prior to implementation. Option number B, identify whether any compensating controls exist. Option number C, determine whether another DBA could make the changes. Option number D, report a potential segregation of duties violation. Now, what exactly this question is saying that the DBA, they're often involved in the development task, particularly when it comes to the database schema changes. Okay, they might have to write the scripts to modify the database structures or create new database objects. They are responsible basically, for deploying these changes to the production environment as well. Deployment of what? Applying these schema updates or installing the new version of the database software, right, in the production environment. Okay. Now, if the DBA is both developing and implementing, if now the question is saying that a database administrator, that a single database administrator, means single, a single person, a single database administrator, he is both developing as well as implementing. So there is a risk, okay, that what potential there is a potential to introduce unauthorized changes, or or fraudulent changes can occur, right? So we need to have control, which is what? Primary control is what? Have a segregation of duties. Okay. However, due to limited resource, we cannot do that. We cannot have that. So we should be having what? Compensating controls. Now, option number A here is saying that ensure a change management process is followed prior to implementation. Now, understand one thing. Even if you have the change management process, okay, of course, that will be prior to the implementation, right? But again, if this task is allotted to a single person, single database administrator, okay, even let's say he has developed something, okay, now this whatever changes needs to be made, that is approved in the change management meeting. Okay, there is a change management process, okay, it is approved, but there is still a possibility that some other changes could be deployed, okay, fraudulent or unauthorized, sorry for the bad handwriting, changes could be applied because this change management process happened what? Prior to the implementation, right? Of course, it will be prior to the implementation. So, but if a single person is doing what? Developing as well as implementing, there is a high chance that whatever was developed, whatever was, approved in the change management, meetings and all, altogether something different was implemented because the same person is doing the entire activity, right? So this cannot be the solution, right? You can say that, having this process of change management, it can act as a, small compensating control, but again, it will not directly address the risk which we are having. Okay. Now, option number B is, again, this will be the right option, that you need to have what? Identify whether any compensating control exists for addressing this specific issues of segregation of duties, right? Option number C is saying determine whether another database administrator could make the changes. So option number C is like you are recommending the solution, because here question is saying an IS auditor finds that means what? A single DBA, right? And option number C is saying that can we have some other DBA to implement things? But again, that's a part of the recommendation. That's a part of recommending a solution. Okay. Option number D is saying what? Report a potential segregation of duties violation. Again, you cannot directly report, right? And having another DBA, it may or it may not be there because of what? The word limited resource. Correct? So the correct option over here is option number B, identify whether any compensating controls exist. Let's look at the next question. A data center previously required key access control, now also requires biometric authentication for entry. What kind of control was introduced? Option number A, compensating, B, corrective, C, detective, D, preventive. The correct option is option number D, preventive controls. I am sure that most of the people might have blindly gone for option number A, compensating control, and this is the deliberate reason I have kept this question in between. And and I'm sure that most of the people might have not even read the question properly. This is where active reading is very important. Okay, this question again, let's read this question once again. What they are saying. A data center previously required what? Key card access. So previously, what control they had? They had what? The access control was through the key card system, right? Now, also, now also, it means along with this key card, they also require what? They also require biometric authentication for entry. Okay, so along with this key card, biometric is has also become mandatory. So multi-factor authentication. So key card was there. Now along with that, we have what? More stringent biometric control. So what kind of control was introduced? What kind of control is biometric? It's a preventive control. It is preventing the unauthorized access. Okay? Every time compensating controls will not come. You have to be very careful when you're reading the question. That's the reason, we were spending a lot of time in knowing the meaning of the term to compensate. If the primary control we cannot, if it is impractical or impossible, a primary control, a main control, a good control, if that is impractical or impossible, then only we'll be having what? Compensatory control. But compensatory control will not come every time. Here, the question is altogether different. Here we are, along with the key card access, we are having what? Additional, more stringent biometric. We are not compensating. We are in fact rather we are increasing things. So it's a preventive control. Okay. So be very careful when you are reading the question. All right, so let's look at the question. Because of technical constraints, because of technical constraints. This is hint. The question is directly saying, just now we have discussed, right? There could be what, there is no segregation of duties. Maybe it is impractical for us. Maybe it's impossible for us, right? So here, what they are saying is that there is issue in the system. There is what technical level constraint is there, and because of which segregation of duties is not possible within the accounts payable system. What is the most effective compensating control IS auditor should recommend? Okay. Now, before we discuss these points, okay, option number, let's just read this once. Option number A, require written authorization for all payment transaction. Option number B, review payment transaction history. Option number C, reconcile payment transaction with the invoice. Option number D, restrict payment authorization to senior staff members only. Okay, before we discuss, let's have a brief discussion, for P2P process, procure to pay. Now, this P2P process, it's not a part of, your CISA review manual directly as such. However, they have asked few questions from this topic of P2P. In fact, we'll be having a separate dedicated video also for this topic and the questions which are linked with this topic of P2P process. Now, what exactly is P2P process? What is P2P? Procure to pay. From the time you have procured till the time you are making the payment to the vendor, to the outsider. Okay. What exactly is the workflow happens in the organization? It's important from the exam angle. Okay. They normally ask one or two questions, from this area P2P. Okay. The questions are very easy. However, if you understand this entire cycle, P2P cycle, it will be very easy for you to answer that question. Okay. Now, what exactly, in simple words, what exactly is this procure to pay? Right from the time, we think of procuring something till the time we are making the payment to the third person, to the vendor. What exactly is the workflow which is followed by the organization, and what are the level of controls which the organization is having? We'll be discussing that. Okay. So now in this image, you can see that the main important area which we'll be discussing here is three-way match. And this is where you'll understand why exactly do we even need this entire chain in place. What exactly do we mean by this three-way match? We'll be discussing that also, right? So the first thing is that whenever the organization needs to buy something. Okay, maybe there is a requirement from a specific department, right? So there is what, there is a requirement identification, and then for that there is purchase requisition, is made, right? Now this purchase requisition is approved, it is authorizing the purchase requisition, right? Now you need something, right? But to get something, there will be a lot of vendors in the market. Okay, now you want to do CISA, right? There are so many trainers available in the market, right? Now you have the requirement, or you have the need. Let's say in your organization, in your company, they say, okay, Mr. X, Mr. or Miss Y, you need to pursue CISA. You need to get CISA certification within next 3 months. So there is a requirement, right? Now, for getting the lectures, for getting the training, there will be multiple people in the market, right? So you'll be doing what? You'll be shortlisting the vendors, right? So once this, the purchase requisition is authorized, there will be what? Shortlisting of the vendors will be there, because we will, purchase or procure something from the vendor which is beneficial for us, right? In terms of the quality, in terms of the cost, in terms of, all other factors, right? So shortlisting the vendors will happen. You will do what? You will take the quotation from the vendors, right? Then afterwards, whichever vendor is, beneficial for us, that vendor will be selected, right? And then there is what? Purchase order approval will happen. Purchase order for this particular amount, we there is a purchase order. Okay, let's say, you say, okay, for $1,000 we have agreed for something. So purchase order is created for $1,000, right? Now there will be what? There will be shipment notice will be there. Okay, once you have, made the order, right? You will be receiving that. So receiving the goods in a go down, and once the goods is received, there will be what? GR, goods receipt note. Goods receipt note will be made saying that now whatever we have ordered, it's very important, please pay attention on what I'm saying over here. Otherwise, see, it's very simple thing. It's actually very common sense. It happens everywhere. Even if a small kid, if that small kid, wants to buy, $1 chocolate also, just imagine, your childhood days. You cannot directly go and, make the payment. Can you? No, right? Normally, when we were, this happens in India, right? We are not given pocket money as such. Let's say if I want to buy chocolate, I'll have to, request first my mother. My mother will not be making the payment, right? The ultimate payment will be made by my father. All these things will be recorded by my grandparents, grandfather or grandmother. They will be making all these things, how much expenditure I have made in a day. I have purchased this chocolates, I have purchased these groceries, and all those things, right? So there will be one person who will be recording everything. I will be making request to my mother. My father will be making the payment. He will be approving whether or not do he, he should be buying a toy for me, or a chocolate for me, or some gift for me, right? It's a simple thing, right? And it happens everywhere. So nothing to worry about as such, so it's the thing is that, purchase order approval. Let's come back to our discussion. So it's $1,000, right? Now it's very important that you have actually received the goods, right? Whatever you have ordered. So for that, there is what? Goods receipt note is that it is saying that whatever we have ordered is actually received to us. Because understand one thing, it may be possible that there is a purchase order for $1,000, but we have not received anything in our go down, and the vendor is asking us to make the payment. Is it not possible? It is very much possible, right? We have not received the goods, we have not received the materials, and they are asking us, they are giving us the invoice saying that, hey, please make $1,000 payment. And I will say, hey dude, I have not even received the goods. What payment are you asking for? The purchase order was there, and you are issuing me the invoice. However, I have not received the goods. So it's very important that you receive the goods, right? And how you will verify whether the goods is received to you? Through GRN, good received note. So basically here there will be three things, So when we say three-way match, there are three things. Number one is the PO. Okay, and I'll tell you what's the relevance of this. Okay, and second important thing is the goods received note, because this is a proof that actually we have received whatever we have ordered. This is a proof. And that too, it's not just that you have received something. I'll exactly tell you how, how there can be error or fraud or whatever thing which can happen here in this three-way match. And it's very important that you understand this thing. Because see, normally even in the exam, if they have to ask you a question, they'll be asking at the max one or two questions, from here. They normally ask this question, and that's the reason I am teaching you this, because there is no separate topic as such, for this P2P process. But for cracking any question, you need to understand this thing, and it's important, from the practical angle also, right? So goods receipt note says that, whatever you have ordered. Now listen to my words very carefully. Whatever you have ordered, it has received in the same condition, same quantity, right? The quality, the quantity, because there can be a possibility that the goods which you have received, it is damaged, right? So goods received note, it's a proof that whatever you have ordered, that is something which you have received. Now understand something. Okay, now understand something. Can this happen that I have not ordered something? There is no PO, there is no purchase order. I have not ordered something, but there is this one stranger organization, or maybe there is some fraud in my company, and there is one senior person, he's having some relative and they are doing some business, and randomly they have sent few goods in my godown, and the goods receipt note is made that, okay, we have received all these goods, but hey, we have not even ordered that. Okay, you are randomly sending some goods, some random goods to us, and then you are issuing the invoice saying that please make the payment. Because here you can see there is what recording the invoice happens. Three things are very important: purchase order, goods receipt note, and invoice. You can see this sixth one, PO, that's eighth one, goods receipt note, and this invoice. And this is the place wherein we will be doing this thing, three-way match, before making the payment. Can you see this diagram? So before the money, see, in the end, the entire game is about, the money. Entire business works for money, right? So before the money goes out of your company, we need to make sure that we have all the necessary controls so that there is no risk of fraud or error. Okay, so before we make the payment, there will be three-way match. And what's the relevance of this and how this will be done? This is what we are discussing right now. So what I'm saying is that randomly that one fellow, he has sent some goods in my go down, and he has sent me the invoice, and he's asking me for money. But I'll say, hey, for what reason are you asking me money? Because this is something, there is no purchase order for this. Randomly you have sent some goods to my go down, you are sending me the invoice, and you are asking me for the payment. So that is what the three-way match is not happening here. Okay, similarly, okay, whatever you have ordered, the same thing, have you received? Let's say you have ordered 1000 units quantity wise, and let's say in the go down you have only received 800 units. Okay, now they are sending you the invoice for 1000 units. They are saying please make the payment for 1000 units, and you will say, hello, we have not received 1000 units, because the goods received note, it is only for the 800 units. So we are yet to receive the balance 200 units. Again, it can be error, it can be whatever reasons, right? But the thing is that the three-way match is not happening. Okay, similarly, can this happen? Now let me remove everything. Similarly, can this thing happen that, yeah, so right now what we have done, we are, one way, one part of the three-way match is that you are matching purchase order and the goods received note, that whatever you have ordered is something which you have received. Or in other words, you can even reverse this way: whatever you have received is something which you have ordered. Okay, again, same thing can go for the invoice also. Okay, invoice and the purchase order. Let's say the invoice is saying, sorry, the purchase order is saying you have received 1000 units, and one unit is costing you $1. So what's the total? $1000, right? So purchase order is for $1000, but the invoice they are sending for $1200. Again, there will be what? There will be mismatch, there will be discrepancy. Why? Because invoice will again be checked with the purchase order. So you will say, hey, the purchase order was only for $1000, and you are asking me $1200 for the invoice, for the payment. Okay, there is some mismatch. Again, this is the second part of the three-way match. So here with the goods receipt note and PO we have done the matching. Here from with the invoice and the PO we have done the matching. Again invoice and the goods receipt also we will do the matching. The third part of the three-way match. Saying that we are receiving or recording the invoice for the goods which we have received. Okay, because randomly, again, take the same example, randomly some people have, some company has shared you some invoice. Okay, now they have sent to the invoice, but you will have to check, right, whatever there in the invoice whether have been received, then whether that particular thing was actually ordered in the first place, whether the entire quantity, conditions and everything, whether everything is matching with whatever we have received, right? And whatever details here and here is mentioned, whether everything is matching with the invoice. If everything matches, the entire circle matches, the three-way match happens, then only you will do what? You will make the payment to the supplier. Then only the money will outflow, the money will go from your company. And then you will, there will be reporting, you will be recording these entire transactions, right? So this is how, this is the importance of P2P cycle process. Because let's say if this three-way match doesn't happen, there is a high chance that there can be mistakes or error or fraud can also happen. Okay, and I have given an example also how this can happen if the three-way match doesn't happen. Okay, because I could be working at a senior level, position, and my relative could be doing some business, and randomly I'm sending some goods to the go down, and I'm recording the invoice. I mean the other companies sending the invoice to my company, and they are saying, hey, we have sent you the goods, but we need to check whether that particular thing was ordered in the first place itself, right? That can be the thing that the purchase order is saying only you have to pay only $1,000, and the invoice you are sending for $1,200. So again, there is a mismatch of the amount, right? So there are a lot of ways through which there can be fraud which can happen. So to prevent all this fraud, the three-way matches, three-way matches is done, right? Let's come back to the question. So let's read the question now. So because of the technical constraints, segregation of duties is not possible within the accounts payable system. So it means that, so ideally what should have happened is that there should be role based access control. There should be multiple user roles should be there. A person processing the invoice, a person approving the payments, a person recording the transactions. Each and every duties should be segregated ideally. There should be multiple user roles should be there in the system, but here it's not the case, right? So what is the most effective compensating control IS auditor should recommend? Option number A, require written authorization for all the payment transaction. Option number B, review payment transaction history. Option number C, reconcile payment transaction with the invoices. Option number D, restrict payment authorization to only to the senior staff members. Now option number A is saying that you require that written authorization for all the payment transactions. See, again, understand this thing, written authorization it is good, but the thing is that is it meeting my requirement of the segregation of duties? Because the ultimate issue which I am facing is that there is no segregation of duties. Now there can be a possibility that even though we are having the written authorization, but still multiple roles are being assigned to one single person. That could be one single person, and multiple roles are being assigned, and one of the role is that he's authorizing. Okay, and of course there is a written authorization for all the transaction, but what if he himself is making the payment? What if he himself is recording the transaction, right? So multiple, if multiple roles are assigned, definitely he can misuse his powers, right? That there can be abuse of his authorities, right? So even though require written authorization for all the payment transactions, that doesn't actually meet my requirements of having segregation of duties, right? Option number B is saying that review payment transaction history. Now if you remember my example of I mean whatever we have discussed in the P2P cycle, you will remember there are three things we have discussed. One is the PO, there is GRN, goods received note, and there is what, invoice, right? And then after this three-way match happens, then we do what, we make the payment, and then the everything is recorded, right? So what they are saying is that option of B, you just review the payment transaction history. But just reviewing this payment transaction history, can you understand about these three things? definitely you cannot, right? So option number B will also be not the right option. Let's look at the option number D, restrict payment authorization only to the senior staff members. Now, what if the senior staff member himself he is involved into the fraudulent transaction? He himself is a a person who will misuse his authorities. Do we know that? We don't know, right? So even though we restrict the payment authorization only to the senior staff member, but understand one thing. We have discussed this thing in domain number 2 as well. Business is not run. Business is not run only by one person, right? In business there will be multiple people. So just because he is senior staff member doesn't mean he's the owner of the company. I hope you are understanding my point. Just because he is a senior staff member, he's at a senior level, he is not owning the company. There are multiple people in my company, right? And even though there is what payment authorization is only restricted to the senior staff member or members, it is very much possible that again they it could be a single person or it could be a multiple person group of people. But again, what if they themselves are involved into the fraudulent transactions, because they can misuse their authorities. If you get the additional powers or authorities, there's a high chance that you may misuse your powers. So again, here also the same thing can happen, right? Option number C is saying reconcile the payment transaction with the invoice. So see, here it's saying that okay, you look for the payment transaction and you check for the invoice whether that invoice was recorded, and for what amount the invoice was recorded, what was the due date, when was the payment made, right? So this is the correct option. Okay, of course, here the PO and the GRN, all those things they haven't mentioned. However, if you understand the P2P cycle, you'll at least understand that the payment is being matched with the invoice. Okay, so definitely when you are doing the reconciliation of the payment transaction with the invoices, let's say if there is a fake payment is being made, at least you will get to know that there was no invoice made. So basically, if the invoice is not made, it means that there was no purchase order for that, or maybe the goods have is not received to the company. So there is some mismatch, there is something error or fraud has happened. So at least there is some discrepancy and we can investigate more. So what is the effective compensating control? Again, I'm saying it's not a primary control. Primary control will always be the best control. The question itself is saying you tell me the compensating control. So compensating control will not, there will be a residual risk for sure. There will be some balance risk. Okay, it's not going to bring down my risk to zero, because in the and again it will be not as good as the primary control, because when I say primary control, the first line itself is saying because of what technical constraints. The primary control, ideally, in the system, we should be ideally be having the P2P process. We should be having multiple user roles, right? That is an ideal solution. But again, that's the primary control. So primary control is not there. So we'll be doing what? We'll be having a compensating control to reduce my risk, right? So option number A, requiring the written authorization, or the B or D, it is okay, but it's not going to help me with this thing, with my issue which I am facing, which is that segregation of duties is not possible, right, in the accounts payable system. So only option number C is taking care of my issue, right? So that's why the correct option over here is option number C, reconcile payment transaction with invoice. All right, let's look at the next question. Again, very simple question, similar to the one which we have discussed earlier. A startup organization with limited resource cannot fully segregate duties. What is the most effective compensating control in this scenario? Option number A, rotation of log monitoring and analysis responsibilities. Option number B, additional management reviews, and reconciliation. Similar question we have seen. Option number C, mandatory vacations. Option number D, third party assessment. Okay, very easy, simple question. The correct option is option number B, additional management review. You review, you do the log review, transaction review, reconciliation you do, right? So when you do all these things, so even though you're not having the segregation of duties, but if whatever they are doing, these people, even if a single person is doing, but if we review their logs and their transaction and the events and everything, the person who is doing multiple roles, he will also be scared of not making fraud or something. And if he is making something, that will be discovered in the review and the reconciliation part. So without any question, it's a simple one. The correct option is option number B. Let's move on to the next question. All right, let's look at the next question. Which measure most effectively mitigates the risk arising from? Okay, mitigates what? The risk arising from what? Inadequate segregation of duties during the new code development. Question is focusing on inadequate segregation of duties, and the second hint is what? I mean, it's not a hint, but it is highlighting on which area segregation of duties in which area. It is for the new code development and deployment, right? So basically, how and why we need segregation of duties. This is something we have discussed in domain number three, right? And there will be few questions, in domain number one and domain number two. To be very honest, as of now you might not understand, so you can mark for reviewing this question later on when you finish domain number 3, 4 and 5, because once you finish all these domains 3, 4 and 5, you will understand the technical areas, technical parts as well, and you will be in a better position to understand the questions which were asked in domain number 1. That is the reason. This is the issue, I mean, I won't say it's an issue, but this is what happens, because straight away when you jump solving the questions for domain number 1, you will find some terms which are not used in domain number. I mean, it's not exactly part of domain number 1, but rather it's a part of domain number 3, 4 or 5. Okay, but anyways, in the new code development or deployment, there will be one person or one team, they will write the code, right? the we need to segregate the duties for approving the code basically, right? And also for deploying the code. In fact, we have discussed about this thing in depth in domain number 3 when we say that, a person or group or department developing and testing and implementation, that should be what? That should be segregation of duties, because if the same person or same group does all the three things, there is a high chance that fraudulent activity can happen. They may deliberately insert malicious code, and they can play with the applications. So it's a huge risk when a single person or a single group of department is taking care of all these responsibilities, right? So we definitely need what? Segregation of duties here. But if there is inadequate segregation of duties, which measure will most effectively mitigate? Basically, they are asking about a kind of compensating control over here, right? Option number A is saying creation of staging environment. Staging environment, it is basically a replica, or you can say a near identical copy of the live environment. So basically it is used for testing purpose, right? So whatever the codes has been written, right? So before implementation, it's very important that you test those codes for the bugs or issues, right? And that you rectify in a timely manner. So for the testing purpose as well, it's very important that we test in a near replica of the live environment, because whatever features, whatever things we'll be looking for in the live environment, if we are having the same environment for the testing, it will be really good for identifying the bugs earlier, right? So this is why we need what? Creation of the staging environments is required. Now, even though we are having the staging environment, does it really take care of the inadequate segregation of duties? The answer is no, because if there is no segregation of duties, even though we are having the staging environment, even though I go through the entire testing process, everything, but still I have the authority to deploy a malicious code if I have the fraudulent intention. So even though there is a staging environment, if I am the person who is implementing, I am the person who is writing the code, I am the person who is studying for the CISA exam, and I'm the same person who will be checking my own exam. Definitely, I will not make myself fail in the exam, right? And this is what is they are talking about here. So even though there is a creation of staging environment, but that doesn't really take care of the exact issue which we are facing over here, which is inadequate segregation of duty, right? Then option number before looking at option number B, let's look at option number C first. Adding the developers to the change approval board. Again, this is something which we have discussed, in the change management topic, which we'll be discussing in the other domains, right? Maybe you can mark this question, or you can just skip those questions if you haven't watched the 3, 4, and 5. You can just skip this question as of now, and you can come back later on. Okay. Now we have discussed about the change approval board, that basically a change meeting will happen. Okay, with the right justification, the business need and everything will be discussed, and then the approval will be made, right? Now, is it really right to add developers directly to the change approval board? Basically, this is, in fact, it's a bad practice. It will actually worsen the segregation of duties issue, because you are giving this control and authority directly to the developer, which is actually wrong, right? So option number C will definitely not be the correct option. Option number D is saying a small number of people have access to deploy the code. See, it is good. It is good in the sense that it's a good security practice. But again, this is not exactly solving my issue, which is inadequate segregation of duties. The correct option over here is the balance option, which is the post implementation change review, because this will be a kind of an independent review. Basically, after the code is deployed to the production, an independent team, they will be reviewing this, and they'll be basically looking whether the application is working as intended, whether our business requirements are being met, whether the controls are working the way it is supposed to work, and also the vulnerabilities and all those things. So basically, post implementation change review is the correct option over here, right? Now let's move on to the next question. All right, now let's look at the next question, debatable question. Now these are the questions, in the exam, if it comes, you'll have to apply your brain. You'll have to think. Okay. Uh, this is a domain 5 question basically, but this is dealing with the compensating control again. So it is a mix of domain 1 and domain 5 question, because in this question there is this topic which we have discussed. We have a separate video for this in the domain number 5 for man trap doors, for the dead man door, right? You can find that at the start of the domain 5 CDs, where we have discussed about these controls, right? So it's a domain 5, a mix of domain 5 and domain 1 question, but it's a very good question, right? Let's read this question. A company's secure server room. Hint number 1. The first line itself is giving you the hint that it's a what? It's a critical area. It's a secure server room. It uses a batch reader system to log staff entries and exits. Okay. Recording the name, date, and time. Okay. Uh, During an audit, it's discovered that some employees have logged entries but no corresponding exits. So entry is recorded, but exit is not recorded of some employees. Okay. Now, basically, what exactly happens over here is that there is a batch reader system. So basically, the employees are supposed to, either swap the batch or tap the batch, basically, right, and get the access to the secure server room, right? Uh, so what exactly is happening is that, let's say if this is the room, and let's say this is the entrance, right? So here, to get the entry to this room, you'll have to punch the batch, right? And then you can get the entry. So what they are saying is that they have found that few entries are there, but the corresponding exit is not there, because at the time of the exit also, okay, you will have to again do the same process. You'll have to punch the batch, and then it will be recorded that at this particular time, on this particular date, you have entered, right? But it will show that you have not exited. So basically, you have not shown your batch at the time when you were exiting this particular room. So this entry is not there. So how it can happen? If you know the man trap door and the dead man door concept, you will be able to understand what I'm trying to say over here, is that this can only happen when you're doing what? You are doing tailgating. That one person is, you know, let's say here it is Mr. A, and here it's Mr. B. Now Mr. A is punching the batch, right? And the door is getting opened, and Mr. B is just following Mr. A. So Mr. B is not punching his batch, okay, but he's just just behind Mr. A, he's also getting the access without the need of, or without, tapping the badge. So it's a tailgating. So you are authorized, and I am, basically, getting an entry because of your authorization. Okay, it could be that Mr. B is not authorized, or it could be that Mr. B is authorized, but what exactly is happening is that at the time of entry they have recorded, but at the time of exit, it's evening time, it's time of the exit, and the employee is least bothered to mark the exit time, right? And what they are doing is that, um, just on the basis of Mr. A's entry, he's also basically tailgating him and getting the exit, right, without punching the badge. So the auditor, they are saying that there are some entries wherein we can just see the entry time, but the exit entries are not there for the corresponding date. So why this is happening? So it can only happen when the concept, I mean, when the other person is trying to tailgate. Now here, at least the entry record is there. Okay, here at least the auditor is saying that there is entry record, but there is no exit record. But don't you think so? There is also one more risk over here. Since this is a secure server room, it's a critical area. There's one more risk over here. The risk is that what about unauthorized access? Okay, because let's say Mr. A is a authorized user, in that particular room, and let's say Mr. B is not an employee of the company, is some other person, and but just because Mr. A is having the access on the on his card, or on his badge, even Mr. B is taking the entry as a through the tailgating process, right? So this is also a risk, right? Unauthorized access, and that too in a secure server room. All right, so let me just remove all these things. Just a second. Yeah. So I hope you are understanding the question at least till now. Okay. So everything is going smooth, right? All right. To address this discrepancy, which of the following compensating controls would be most effective? Which of the following compensating control? Now the term which they are using over here is compensating control. This is again the reason we were discussing the meaning at the start of the this entire video. We have discussed about what exactly do we mean by the term compensating. And if you remember, we have discussed that when a primary control cannot be implemented, when a primary control cannot be implemented, then only we go for the compensatory control. And why primary control cannot be implemented? Either it is impractical or it's impossible. There is some maybe a resource constraint is there, budget constraint is there, technical constraint is there. There is some issues because of which we cannot go for the primary control, and that's the reason we are going for the compensatory control. Now they have given few hints. Now this kind of question, it is very debatable question, because the way the question is set, at one place they are saying it's a critical secure server room. Nowhere the question is saying that the company is having the budget issues, or something like that. It's a small company. Nowhere the question is saying it's a small company. Nowhere the question is saying they have budget issues. Okay. However, they are saying, and also they are saying that it's a critical area, secure server room. But just because they are using the word compensating control, we need to be very much aware. Okay, so they are using the word compensating control. Now here only one control can be the best control, which is to have a man trap door at the entrance and at the exit points. Because if you have the man trap doors, there is no way two people can get the entry. Okay, and even the risk of unauthorized access, it goes away. Because if there is a man trap door or a dead man door, you will have to do one by one, so entry and exit will match. Okay, so this is the only control for dealing with this kind of risk. But again, we can say this is a primary control. See, here the question is not about whether this is a preventive control or a detective control or a corrective control. The question, see, whenever you need to decide whether to go for this control, whether this control is a compensating control or not a compensating control, you need to think that whether this is a primary control or a secondary control. Because compensatory control can only try to compensate. Let's say if the airline, if the airlines they have lost my luggage or my luggage is damaged, they are trying to compensate for my loss. It doesn't mean that my luggage was just worth, maybe like maybe let's say the airline company is giving me $500. So I cannot say that my luggage was only worth $500. It could be more than that, right? I could be having my some personal belongings, personal memories, maybe like photographs or something which I have lost, which cannot be even valued in terms of the dollars, right? Because my emotions are attached to those things, but still they are trying to pay me $500, right? Now it can only compensate for my loss, but I cannot see that my loss is, I mean, I may or I may not. So this is the importance of the word compensate. Okay, we should not always say that, okay, because some people say that, okay, option number B is it's a preventive control, it's not a compensating control. No, we cannot say the preventive control and we need to check whether it's a primary control or or a secondary control. It's the main control or the secondary control or the compensating control. So here option number A is saying installing security cameras at the doors. Now this can be a, we can say a kind of a compensatory control, because let's say if all these things are being monitored. Now let's say if we have security cameras, we will also mention over there that all your activities are being recorded in our CCTV. So of course when the employees are entering or exiting, they will be aware, they will be conscious that our actions are being recorded, so they will try not to do all this process, or do all these things, not to go for the tailgating and all these things. So they will be, at least they'll be taking conscious decisions, because of the fact that we are monitoring their activities, we are monitoring their actions. Okay, so if we have CCTV cameras, at least what we can do is that we can monitor, okay, which people are doing all these kind of things. Okay, so you can say this is a kind of a compensatory control, because option number B, it is a straight away primary control. It is the best control, and it is the only control which will help me for resolving this issue of tailgating. Understand one thing, my main issue is tailgating over here, and because of tailgating there can be unauthorized access to what? Secure server room. Okay, so this is the main issue, and the only control which can work over here is option number B. But understand one more thing, man trap door or dead man door, it is expensive to deploy, it is not cheap, it is expensive. And maybe that's the reason they are talking about compensatory control. Not all the organizations can afford man trap doors. It requires a lot of budget. Understand this thing carefully. That is a hint that they are using the word compensating control. Now if this word is not there, definitely without any question, I will go for option number B. But because of this word compensating, I need to assume now in the exam hall, if you know the meaning of the term compensating and how it is relevant, only then you will be able to think in this angle. Okay, so just because they're using the word compensating control, I cannot directly go for the primary control here, which is again a preventive control. Okay, that's the reason we need to go for option number A, which is installing security cameras at the doors. Now, option number C is saying changing to a biometric access control system. Again, the same thing can happen, because the issue over here is what? Tailgating. Even though I'm having biometric access, maybe the employee is required to use their thumb impression, but again, tailgating is possible there also. Okay, so this is again not catering my needs. Again, requiring two-factor authentication at entrance and exit points. So they are basically saying that here, along with a badge, you also use, let's say, biometric. So this is something you have, and this is something you are. Something you have, it's a card, it's a badge, right? And something you are, your biometric characteristic. So it's saying you use two-factor authentication, but again, the problem is what? Tailgating, right? So Here also the same thing can happen. Now installing security cameras, now here also tailgating can happen. Yes, it can happen. But at least if it is happening, this will be recorded in the camera, the video footage. And we can review the footage, at the time of the exit, at which employees have done that. We can have even what? We can have deterrent control. Because when we put the notice that your activities are being recorded, they're trying to scare the employees that please don't do all this nonsense activity because your activities are being recorded over here, right? So that's why the correct option over here is option number A, which is installing security cameras at the doors, right? So main thing which we learn in this question is that you need to understand when to use compensating control. If the compensating control word is used, you need to check with the primary control in the place. Because see, there can be preventive control, there can be detective control, there can be corrective control. But each control in itself can have what? Primary control, compensatory control, primary control, compensatory control, primary control, compensatory control. So we should not always say that okay, this is preventive versus compensatory or detective control versus compensatory control. You should always say that when you're comparing compensatory control, compare it with the primary control or the main control, right? So the answer is option number A, installing security cameras at the doors. All right, let's look at the next question. A business unit cannot achieve desired segregation of duties between the operations and the programming due to the size constraint. Straight away, they are saying there is what? There is a size constraint because of the size of the organization. We are having issues for the segregation of duties. Which of the following is the most important for the IS auditor to identify? Option number A, unauthorized user control. B, compensatory control. C, controls over operational effectiveness. Option number D, additional control weakness. It's a very straightforward, simple question. The correct option is option number B, compensating control. Let's look at the next question. Which of the following is an IS auditor's best course of action when the auditee indicates that a corrective action plan for a high risk finding will take longer than expected. So whatever time frame they were having in there, which were agreed for, now they are saying, it can go beyond that because of some reasons which are beyond our control. They are saying that the corrective action plan which was agreed for the high risk finding, now they are saying it will take longer than expected, right? And this is what? This is a high risk finding, right? Now, just now we have discussed, whether it is preventive control or whether it is detective control or whether it is corrective control. Each can have its what? A primary control, a compensatory control. Primary control, a compensatory control. Similarly, here also primary control, compensatory control. Now, question is saying that corrective action plan was decided for high risk finding, which will take longer than expected. So basically, they are saying that for having the primary control in place, it will take additional time. But since it's a high risk finding, we cannot sit idle. We need to have some workaround for time being in place. So at least let's have some interim compensating control, right? So IS auditor's best course of action is what? To determine if an interim compensating control has been implemented. Okay, we agree that it will take longer than expected, but at least do you have some workaround for this for time being, right? This is something which the auditor should determine. Option B is saying require that remediation is completed in the agreed time frame. See, of course, we want this to happen in the agreed time frame, but it's very normal, for these organizations to get beyond the due dates. Okay, so B will not come here, accept the longer target date and document it in the audit system. We cannot do that, right? D is escalate the overdue finding to the audit committee. Directly go to the audit committee. Again, this will not be the correct option. So correct option over here is option number A, determine if an interim compensating control has been implemented. All right, let's look at the next question. Which of the following is the best way to address segregation of duties in an organization with budget constraint? With budget constraint. Option number A, perform an independent audit. B, implement compensating controls. C, hire temporary staff. D, rotate job duties periodically. The correct option is very simple, straightforward question. Implement compensatory controls. So with this, we have discussed all the questions in this topic of compensating controls. Thank you.